let's take a look at Maya's timeline and playback controls. The scene is 0 to begin in your project files. Now if we bring our attention to the bottom of Maya, we'll find its timeline. Here we see these series of numbers that represent our frames, which is basically a moment in time. We can use the left mouse button to scrub through each frame in our animation sequence. And though this is a very basic tool, this is actually very useful to an animator because we can use this to make sure that our timing is correct. We could also use this to just check a frame. Let's say frame 30. Just want to make sure that everything's kosher on this frame. Well, we can go ahead and simply left click, and now that'll give us an idea of how that moment looks in time. So again, very basic but very helpful. Now underneath the timeline, what we have is the range slider, and we have numbers that surround it. So our range slider is just a way of adjusting the playback range in Maya. This isn't our rendering playback range, just again what we're able to see in the viewport. So we have two types of ranges. We have an animation range, which is our entire sequence here on the timeline, and that is specified in our very first field at the bottom left of Maya, and the last field at the bottom right. So you can see our range here, it's from 1 to 60. Now we also have that same range in the two fields that follow. Now these two numbers here, these are our playback frames. Let me go ahead and show you something. Take a look at the range slider. If we were to go ahead and take one of the handles here, let's say the start handle, and start to adjust it, notice we can adjust our playback range to view a segment of the animation. So currently you have it set to frame 19, and you can see that number is updated here to show us the new playback range. So if we wanted to, we could adjust the end time playback range to anything we'd like, let's say to frame 48. So currently our playback range is from 19 to 48, while our animation range is still 1 to 60. So we can scrub through and take a look at just this segment if we needed to study it. Very nice. If we want to get back to our animation range, it's just a matter of double clicking on our range slider. And take a look, we're brought back to 1 and 60. If we double click again, we revert back to the segment that we've edited or adjusted. Alright, so that's really helpful. Again, this is our range slider. We can also hold on to the range bar here and start to slide that to view any range we'd like inside of our animation range. So again, pretty straightforward but very helpful. A lot of times as we animate, we want to focus on just a certain section of the animation. If we need to make any tweaks, we don't need to view the entire range. We can get to the frames that we need to study. Now, over to the bottom right, we have our playback controls. So let's take a look at this first field before we actually get to the playback icons here. This field is our current time field. This shows us what frame we're currently viewing. So notice I've clicked on frame 41, and that's exactly what we see here. So we can see that the current time field is updated to reveal what is shown on frame 41. And we could get to any frame we'd like. If we wanted to see how frame 100 looked, we can go ahead and type in 100, and even though it falls outside of our range, we're still able to see that frame. So here's our current time field again, very helpful. Sometimes we want to get to an exact frame, we can go ahead and type that in here. Now, if we were to go ahead and take a look at the buttons to the right of our current time, here we have our playback controls. This is very similar to what we'd see on a remote. So if we want to get to the beginning of our playback range, we can go ahead and use this first icon. If we want to go ahead and move one frame before, we can go ahead and use the next icon. So we can use this to scrub one frame at a time. So as we start to click, 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 notice we stay within our playback range. Now how about the next icon? This allows us to scrub one keyframe at a time. So a keyframe is essentially a moment recorded in time, and we'll take a look at that shortly when we learn how to create keyframes. But just to show you this, if we were to go to the Show menu inside of the viewport and turn on NURBS Curves, you'll then find the creature's animation control. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these curves. Let's say this blue curve here that controls his elbow. Now take a look, we have these red markers. These represent our keyframes. So let's say if we wanted to scrub one keyframe at a time to take a look at each pose that has been recorded. Well, we can use this icon here. So notice we're able to move forward in time and skip to every keyframe that way. You'll see that we also have mirrored icons that essentially do the same thing, but this time we're able to move forward in time. All right, so if we want to move forward one keyframe at a time, he'll most certainly do so. If we want to move forward one frame at a time, again, we can do so. And if we want to move to the very end of our playback range, here's how we do that. Now, the two icons in the center allow us to either play the animation in reverse or play it forward. You'll see when we click on the icon again, we're able to stop the animation. Now, why would we want to play a sequence in reverse? Well, a good rule to keep in mind in animation is that if your animation looks good in reverse, chances are it's going to look well playing back forward. So if we wanted to, we could double click on our range bar, hit the play button, and take a look at the entire animation. And then we could always play it in reverse just to make sure that things look good from here. So that might seem very abstract, but believe it or not, it's very helpful. And as you start to get more comfortable with animation, you might use the reverse button often just to make sure that things look well. Alright, now underneath our playback controls, we have some information about animation layers, which we'll be getting into. We can essentially view what layer we're working in. Taking a look at the drop-down menu right underneath the current time field, and then to the right of that, if we are working with any character sets, which we'll also get into, we can go ahead and view them from here. Then we also have an auto key tool, which we'll learn how to use to speed up the time it takes to create animations. Now next to that, what we have are our animation preferences, and then we can get to the script editor. The script editor is used to create tools, custom tools in Maya. So we won't be getting into that in this introductory course, but we have several courses that cover how to script for rigging for animation just to make our lives easier. We'll get into the animation preferences shortly, but I just wanted to again show you how to work with the timeline, how to work with the playback controls so that you can comfortably go through and again check your animations, either viewing the entire animation range or your playback range, just to make sure things are looking nice before you're ready to hand your animation off to the next artist. Alright, so that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at Maya's animation preferences.